Okay, incredible, incredible. We are here, we are live, we are direct. And today I'm really delighted, Manuel, that you've said yes to joining me as a friend of Coffee with Kofi. Um, as I sort of share with you, I like to start with a bit of an introduction. And Manuel Heichlinger is known for leading the delivery and research function for EMEA at Audeliss, the global search firm that works with amazing global brands, but as well as emerging startup companies to really support them in that journey to find the best talent in the market, as well as providing market leading insights. And you have enviable gala and awards that go with that to support the mission to make corporate life as inclusive and a place of belonging for as many people as possible, which I love. Prior to this role, Manuel had a stellar international career in talent acquisition, working for blue chip organizations, including Continental, famous tire brand, and more, Deloitte, HSBC, LinkedIn, and also Michael Page. And when he is not at Audeliss, you may find Manuel and his husband, Suki Sandhu, bringing glamour to the globe with authenticity that is both inspiring and refreshing. So thanks once again. Was anything I said in there incorrect? Factually needs to be checked.
Wow, no, what an introduction. Thank you so much. You make me blush, really, yes.
You're matching the color of my hoodie today, so I love that.
It's great to speak to you today.
No, perfect. I spoke no lies, and I tried to keep it succinct because there's so much more that we're going to unpack and go into. But yeah, I told no lies, and I've been a big fan of your work, Suki's work, Rachel, and the rest of the team for a while, as you know. So to be able to get this finally to happen through lifing both of us and trying to get refurbishments done and all this sort of stuff. So thank you once again. And yeah, for anyone that hasn't had the chance to meet you IRL in real life, as the cookies say, can we please start with the genesis of Manuel? So where you grew up, etc., just to situate people in who is the man.
Yeah, sure. I try to keep it short because I'm already nearly 50, so there's a lot to go through. But I keep it very simple. So I grew up in a city in southern Germany, not far away from Stuttgart. It's a town that's very much defined by its automotive industry. So there's a big Mercedes factory where my dad worked for over 40 years. Very Catholic. It's very proper. It's this kind of part of Germany where people's life ambition is to basically at some point have a deposit to buy a house and be a house owner. You go to church on the weekend, those kind of things. So it's kind of and you keep your space around your house very clean. You have this kind of good neighborhood kind of thing. But it's kind of, I don't know. I found it as a child. I found it, first of all, it was nice. It was very safe. It was very kind of comfortable. But then when you get a bit older, it can also be a bit suffocating when you feel like everybody's in everybody's business. And I felt it was quite a small town. And I always tell the story that like early on, I kind of figured out obviously that something, I was different than the other boys, but I didn't have a name for it. It was like when for those that are much more younger than I am, there was no internet when I grew up. There was no easy way of just like going somewhere and finding stuff out about how you feel or what's going on. So I felt like, but I was different. I didn't have a word for it. And I felt like being in a quite small town, that it makes it probably harder for you to really figure out who you are and having that kind of opportunity. So I think from an early age, there's stories like my parents said when I was 8 or 9 already, I said, oh, I want to go and see the world. I don't want to stay here. I don't want to basically be in that small community forever. And that's what I did when I turned 18 or 20. I studied in Stuttgart first, which was nearby. But then when I did my, it's a slightly different system in the UK, in Germany than the UK, but it's kind of similar to a bachelor degree or something like that. When you're halfway through, then I did my master's basically somewhere else. So I moved to Hanover in the north of Germany, which was a bigger city. And also it was more, I was myself. I always say to people that was the start for me of my coming out, because I was able to completely reinvent my persona because I moved somewhere where nobody knew me. And I literally, when I moved there, I was like, okay, right. The first day I'm going to go to university, I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to be a gay man, and I'm not going to be apologetic about it. And I haven't told anybody at home at that point that I was actually gay. And I thought, like, I'm trying this out now to see how this feels. And then literally a few months later, when I came back for Christmas break to see my family, I had my public coming out to my parents and my sister and everybody else. So that was a very important part for my life, was that kind of moving somewhere else and finding myself in a space where I was like able to reinvent myself as a person, true to myself. So not like pretending to be somebody I'm not, but actually being the person I actually am, rather than pretending to be somebody else.
That is powerful. So in many ways, you know, growing up in a conservative Catholic area where, you know, I was raised a Catholic as well, still practice, etc. I've had my journey with it. I've had my journey, but it, you know, being gay is not something that was necessarily spoken about or particularly, I would say, encouraged. In church, it would really, when they talked about relationships, it would certainly be on the heterosexual side of things with all the stories and they told. And I really appreciate the idea of travel being a great blocker. And, you know, in coaching, we do this sometimes where you'll take someone to the past or you ask them to visualize a future state, a future them. And it's such a powerful thing where you can stay in the same place, but you can go somewhere. But you physically moved and then decided, as I'm hearing it, not to perform, not to pretend, and to be unapologetically. And I love that, unapologetically, because why the hell should you apologize? This is who you are, right? This is who you are.
Yeah. So that was a really, it was a really important kind of, it was also a separation for the first time, you know, moving out of the family home and running your own household, so to say, you know, being quite independent in that sense. And then I think the next part was that, like, the studying, that was an interesting part, right? Because I was like thinking, what should I study? And when I decided for economics, it wasn't because I wanted to move into economics or into accounting or any of that. It was actually, initially the view was, I want to become a journalist. And I was writing for a newspaper in my spare time when I was a teenager. And I did an internship there as well. And one of the editors there, when I said I want to become a journalist, I think I want to study journalism. He said, no. If you want to become a journalist, don't study journalism. He said, study anything that gives you an edge in a certain area. You know, study a subject where you can be very knowledgeable about. So it could be economics, could be politics, could be anything. And then you write about it, because then you have to know, like, because journalism, he said, it's important obviously to know how to write an article, how to craft it, but you should have a subject matter expertise in something. So that was his advice, and I thought it makes sense, and so I that's what I did. But then, as you said earlier, in my obviously I was never a journalist, so it kind of never worked out that way. Which is probably one of the things I always tell people is, like, you know, you can plan your life or your career as much as you wanted, and things just happen, and it took different turns. And so here we are, like over 20 years later. I'm not a journalist. I'm working in search, internal acquisition, which is very different, but I think it was still, the initial plan was that, and it then it's just morphed into something different basically throughout my studies.
And again, the role of destiny shapers, changers, you name it, keeps coming up in these conversations. You know, it's like a conversation with a teacher, one conversation with a manager of a role, and then something sparks, you know, and then you go down this path which wasn't what you planned necessarily, but brings you to where we are today. And I wanted to reverse back, and I do want to talk about your studies and how you blended things. Reversing back, I kind of skipped over, we moved on to studies. There's something about coming back from university and coming out to your family that I can only imagine. Like, it's in my mind akin to coming back and I've got married, or coming back and I've had a baby, or coming back and having a baby, or coming back and I'm emigrating. It's like a big story in most people's life, that coming out process. And I understand that it can be met with mixed reception. You know, there can be acceptance, and we always knew, we just waited for you to tell us, or there can be denial that, how can this be? Like, what happened? So how was it received by your family when you sort of shared it with them, and just telling us a bit about that, just to help others that may be on the journey or just thinking like, oh God, like, I've got some big news and I don't know how this is going to go down.
For me it was, so basically before I moved to Hanover in summer 2000, and so it was I go one step back because it was quite interesting actually. Because in summer 2000, I was at this point where I felt, okay, something has to change because I can't live in these two realities anymore, where I'm pretending to be one person to the outside and I'm a very different person on the inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to square this off, and I tried to work it through, and it didn't work. And at the time, I was also in a musical theater production, and that took a lot of my focus away. And when that was finished, before I then actually went to Hanover, I thought, okay, I need to do something else. And I came across this article somewhere that in Germany at that time you could go to a monastery anywhere in Germany, or in most of them, and just live there for a week with the monks for free, and just like work alongside them and do your chores and give a little donation. And so that's what I did. So I went to like a monastery in Bavaria, in a tiny little town. And the interesting thing was that because I was so much just with myself and my thoughts, and like in this routine with the monks every day, and there was one monk I would go on walks and we would talk about anything. And at some point I just told him, I just came out to him. We were walking next to each other and we were in a mountain somewhere. And that conversation was so helpful because he was so not judgmental, and he was so much like, well, like really helping me to get you just to accept and to not feel any. I never felt really shame, but not to feel like some kind of guilt or some sort of responsibility for others, and just saying, look, you need to do what's right for you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I told my best friend before I actually went to Hanover, and he was very positive. He was this, what you said earlier, like, oh, I always thought, I always knew. And actually other people asked me about, is Manuel probably gay or not? And I always like said, I don't know, you need to ask him, kind of thing. But he was not surprised, and he was very positive and supportive. But then when I was at university for that 6 months before I came home at Christmas, because I'm very close to my family, to my friend, to my mom and my dad and my sister, and they didn't know, and I didn't want to tell them over the phone, but I got in the situation of having my first what's it called? Like I had a messy kind of falling in love with somebody who was obviously not gay, and I was like crushed by it, and I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't tell anybody because I obviously had my best friend. I could tell him, but I couldn't tell my family, and I felt it was really difficult, right? So I had this clear thing when I came back for Christmas. I'm gonna tell them because I just need to get it out now, and so I did, and I told my sister first, and she was absolutely fine. And my parents was a bit more difficult, and I think more in the sense because, and then I mean that was in 2000, and yeah, 2000. So that's a long time ago, 25 years ago. There was not a lot of LGBT storylines. There was still a lot of stigma around the HIV crisis and those kind of things. I think there was a lot of views that when you're gay, that's a lot of hurdles in your life. And I think that was my mom's initial reaction. She was just very worried, about what it means for my career, what it means for my personal life, what it means for my health and my safety. Like there was just so many, I think, things she was worried about more than anything else. And it was difficult for her to wrap her head around it. And so the initial conversation wasn't probably as positive as I wanted it to be honest. And I was quite upset about it. And when I then spoke to my other best friend about it, he said, look, you should understand that it took you a few years to be on that journey. So you can't just expect your parents to make that journey in like 5 minutes. So you need to give them. And she said, I know it's hard, and I know but you need to give them the time and the space to work through that as well. And they will come around to it. And I think actually the best moment in the whole thing was a day later when my dad is usually the more quiet, but my mom is the more, active one and the one driving things. And so I was planning for a big New Year's party at home. And so my dad drove me to the supermarket. We got stuff for it and so on. And when we drove back to the house, he stopped in the driveway and he stopped the car. And I remembered it forever. He just turned around and looked at me and he said, look, just want to say one thing to you. It's all going to be fine. I know your mom. She just needs a little bit of time. So just give her time. She will come around to it, but it will all be fine. Don't worry. And it was so powerful because it kind of gave me that thing about, yeah, okay, I get it. And it was fine. It was very quickly. It wasn't like taking a huge amount of time. It was just like, I think she needed a little bit of doing her own research and looking at stuff up. And then eventually, I mean, then in fact, it was like, I met somebody in Hanover in February 2001. So after that, and then they met him, I think a few months later. So And since then, I mean, they have been super supportive of everything. There was never
Yeah.
then any question, but it was just, initial thing was a bit rocky. So if you ask about advice, I would just always say, look, give people time and space. Don't expect them to all kind of just welcome the news with open arms. I think people react differently to these kind of things, and some people just need a little bit more space to kind of think it through or work it through. It doesn't mean they don't love you. It doesn't mean that they don't accept you. It just means they need a little bit of space.
That's a
And
beautiful piece of advice there. And you know, it is so true in what I do, and just observing the human condition, that we all navigate change very, very differently. You know, and if you look at, say, grief as another end of a spectrum, where a relationship changes, be it with your work or personal relationship or whatever, you know, you could go through like 5 different emotions, sometimes in one day, you know, in terms of like denial, anger, you know, just all of the different things that come up. So it's really good to give that perspective around, you know, you've been ruminating. I mean, you went to a monastery, man, like to really get into it. All of this journey on your own, like going through it to get ready, and then ta-da, you present it. And it makes sense when you position it like that, that of course they're going to take time and react differently. But I'm so glad that your dad did what I think is really the linchpin of belonging and inclusion, you know, the reassurance that it will be okay and it will take time, but we're here for you. You know, we are here for you. So yeah, love that. Back to business, because this is partly business inspired as well, but I think you've really helped already. Like, you talked about economics, and what I noticed in your background is like business and HR have kind of featured interchangeably in like your academic pursuits. So you've talked about the business side, and then journalism, and then now I'm like, where does the HR bit come into it? So can you shed some light on your move into HR and how that happened, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always say, and I will always challenge candidates. You know, when you interview candidates, and I mean, probably interviewed 10,000 candidates in my career or something crazy, but when they always tell you that they knew from very early on where they wanted to be, and I said, that's bullshit. I mean, if anybody tells you that their dream job was when they were growing up to be a recruiter, that's absolute bullshit. So I literally fell into recruitment, right? And I'm proud of that, because I'm not proud. I'm not apologizing for it, because I think it is just, sometimes it's just life. You know, you plan for something and then something else happens. And I think it's important that you keep your eyes open, because otherwise you're missing amazing opportunities on the way. And for me, it was, when I finished studying in 2004, it was not the easiest labor market. So it wasn't that people were just waiting for little Manuel knocking on their door and like getting a position. And so what I had to do is I had to take an internship for 6 months. It was a paid internship, but it was for 6 months at Continental, at the, as you said, tire and car supplier, and in their headquarters in Hanover. But what was great in that one was it was in their recruiting HR team, but with a focus on HR marketing. So it was basically creating a more comprehensive and better employer brand for the company, for engineers specifically, but also for business people. Because what they found was that people didn't know Continental enough. So they were like way back in the rankings. When students were asked, what are your top 5 or top 10 companies you want to apply for? They would say BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, those kind of companies. Nobody would say Continental, because nobody knew that they did a lot of the exciting stuff. So I was basically working for 6 months in that department on HR marketing, but I was also then starting to help them to review CVs. And that was, again, I'm showing my age here. We got CVs every day in like folders, like big folders, because in Germany you need to send your CV, you need to send all your references and writing, you need to send all your certificates, everything. So you have these big folders and you have to go through them. You have to read the cover letter, blah, 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 and then decide, are they going through or not to interview. So that was my first kind of, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I like that. You know, I was like, well, that's interesting, you know, because you kind of getting a glimpse into people's careers and what they want to do, and you kind of matching them up and their motivations and so on. I like that, right? So I felt like, and I was quite good at that, and I was obviously very early on. I was like 26 or something, and when the internship stopped, there was no role for me there. And so I obviously asked my boss, can you help me? And she kind of introduced me to a few people, but she introduced me also to a few recruiting agencies. And Michael Page was one of them. And they had an office in Berlin at the time. They had in various locations, but they wanted to open or expand their office in Berlin. I was in Hanover, which is not too far away. It's like a 2-hour drive. And so that's how it happened. So they basically interviewed me. I thought to give me a job somewhere, but they interviewed me and said, oh, we would like you to work for us. And so basically that's how I then moved into that. And again, very naive, because I thought, oh yeah, it's a recruitment company, so I'm going to do recruitment. That wasn't true. I did nothing. I did sales the whole day. I was literally, and I wasn't in a market where it was still very tough and they didn't have a lot of relationships. So what I did was just hammering the phone every day, 40, 50 calls, trying to get people to convince, to meet with a 27-year-old who has no clue about anything and to tell them how to do their recruitment, right? So that was quite interesting, but I was very good at it. So I got, within 5 years, I was promoted several times. I was leading a team. I moved to Hamburg. So it was a really great time in my career, in the sense of I felt I learned very fast and I met very senior people very quickly through my job. And I got on a really big salary for my age, which was also great, because frankly speaking, I mean, when people say they're not motivated by money, it helps. Let's just put it this way. It's not everything, but it helped. But it was interesting for me because it wasn't really the job I wanted initially, but I felt like I just have to suck it up and get through it, because your first years in your career, it's just about, you need to just try to learn whatever you can and take what you can. And it's not always perfect. And then you can figure out what you want to do afterwards. So for me, it was just getting experience, making money, working in a good company, getting my promotions in, and just meeting really interesting people. So that was, but it was hard. It was really hard.
Look, I have no doubt that it's hard. One of my favorite sort of sayings is Bill Gates says that success is a loud teacher, because it convinces smart people that they have nothing more to learn. And when I thought about it, I was like, "Ooh, that's a funky one to say." And good for you, Gates, to say that. But the truth of the matter for me, and maybe for others, this is that you learn so much more from being in hard times. You learn who is with you, who supports you, who champions you, who puts their arm around you. And then you also learn what you're capable of, because often you can't quite see your way out of the situation, but you put in, and look at that, young Manuel, I'm not saying little Manuel, young Manuel went from smashing 50 calls a day to building actual relationships, and then making money, and more money than you probably could have imagined, through just staying with it. And I think somewhere I heard, word on the grapevine, is that he became one of the top 5 revenue generators there. Is that right? Or did
I was in Germany? Yes. Yeah. And also, when you think about it, when we moved to, when the company moved to Hamburg, I moved basically with my boss at the time. And again, being very frank here, he wasn't a great boss. He was a horrible boss. He made people cry in performance reviews deliberately. I had female members of staff who would literally every performance review, he would make them cry. And then he would afterwards, he would blame me and them for oh, why can't you not keep them better under control? This is embarrassing. Well, because you are just an asshole. You act like an asshole. And I felt constantly I had to be that. I was the buffer, between obviously making sure as a manager you needed to deliver certain revenues, and you needed to deliver them with your team or via your team members. So, but for me, it was also about motivating them and keeping them engaged, but also keeping them feeling safe, psychologically safe, in an environment where it was very alpha male. And it was very, I mean, we had one visit, I will never forget that, where senior leadership came over from Europe. I think they were based in France. And my team was half male, half female at the time. And they were also excited to meet these senior people and get their advice and hear what they had to say. And all they wanted to do was go into a bar and get drunk and telling misogynistic and racist jokes, and my team was so deflated afterwards. They're like, what the hell is that? And these are the people that are senior people in our company. These are the people that I should be inspired to be or aspire to be. It was just really, really, really tough, And again, this was 20 years ago. I mean, there were other things. When I started recruitment, actually, I have to tell that story. in German advertisements, the first line in a candidate qualification when they say what they're looking for was usually 25 to 30 years old or 30 to 50, 45 years old. There was an age bracket in there.
Wow.
An age bracket.
Oh, age discrimination. This is before. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I spoke to a Hamburg businessman who was looking for an executive assistant, and I said, so what are you looking for? He said, well, obviously a woman, ideally blonde. She should be quite tall. And like, no. Like, what qualifications? Oh yeah, that's not so important. Like I was like, serious. I mean, there was that time. Not everybody was like that, but I'm just saying it was
the time, right?
It wasn't a great time in that sense, but it was really tough to have that type of leadership. So what I was saying is I moved with my boss to Hamburg, not because I felt like he was an amazing boss, but because I felt it was a great opportunity for me. Because we opened a Hamburg office. I was doing a lot of work already in Hamburg from Berlin, which is like an hour and a half on the train. And so the company moved me to Hamburg. I was like, at that point, 30 years old, and they paid for my move. They paid for the apartment initially. I had this opportunity to build my own team there. So I felt like I do this for the job, not because of this is a great person I want to be there with or something like that. I was very selfishly basically saying I do this for myself. I got a promotion to be manager. And I mean, I have to say, with the billings, as you mentioned, the first year, I think from like a zero, I built like over $1 million with my team for the company, right? And so, but I did it because I built an amazing team. And that's something that's important for me for later in life. It's all about, you need to surround yourself with people that you can trust and they trust you, and you have their back and they have your back. And you also have to have fun, working together, because it's hard enough as it is. As it is,
Yes.
And if you can't have that, and if you only just like demand, that's not how it's going to work. It needs to be a kind of a give and take and a bit of a dance. And you need to be a manager that, of course, you need to be tough at times when things are not going the way they should, but you need to also be understanding and empathetic, and the people need to understand that you're also human. I think you need to show both sides and in equal measures whenever it's relevant. And I learned that in my first managerial job there and that year in Hamburg.
What powerful lesson. I'm putting that in a bottle
and
I'm going to dispense it at free of charge to anybody that wants to know how to be an effective leader, because it's often people don't talk about this vulnerability. That jumps out number one. Being authentic, but the fun piece and just being human, right? Like there's firm, fair, all of that. Manuel, we're going to sell it. We are going to sell this. We're going to sell it. So tell me a bit more about your career, because for me, it demonstrates real variety and versatility, like both in terms of the sector focus and technical skills. Because, we've got like LinkedIn, so obviously tech, we've got Continental, ancillary to the car service industry. You've got Michael Page, where you're covering a number of sectors. I would love more about the journey that you went on post Michael Page, because some might say you're rising, just keep rising and go to the top of the tree there, but then you moved and switched countries and covered different jurisdictions as well. So just in summary, because otherwise you're going to be there for a while, like how did you sort of navigate those different areas? Because you didn't play it safe. You didn't stay in the lane that you knew. You seemed to just continue expanded and try different things.
So for me, and again, a lot of it, to be honest, disclaimer or like newsflash, wasn't planned. It just happened at a time. So the move so obviously I always wanted to go more international, but the move to go actually to London from Hamburg with Michael Page was driven mainly because of Suki, because I met my then boyfriend, now husband, actually through Michael Page at a company event in Germany, famously. And we had a long distance relationship, and it was pretty clear after like a year or so that we said that's okay for now, but that's not what we envisage as our, kind of future, to be constantly traveling and seeing each other only on the weekends and having not that kind of real full experience of a relationship where you're all in, right? Maybe we're all in, but where you basically around each other much more throughout the week as well, etc. And so I moved with the company with Michael Page to London in 2008. But again, for those of us listeners old enough to remember, that was the worst time to move, because it was literally, I moved to London a few months before Lehman collapsed. And I rocked up there in a market where nobody knew me. I had no relation to nothing, and obviously everybody's like, "Who's this guy?" You know. And my English at the time was okay, but it wasn't great, and I didn't know the market very well. Like this whole, what is ACA qualified, ACCA? I mean, there were a lot of things to learn. I was underestimated. I thought, oh, I've been top biller or one of the top billers in Germany. I know my stuff. I move with the same company. I move in the same division, Michael Page Finance, into Michael Page Finance, recruiting finance people in the UK. How hard can it be? I mean, it was bloody tough. And I completely underestimated the challenge of moving cultures, you know. And of course, in my head, I knew, okay, yeah, it's a different culture, but when you're in it, it's so much different. You know, the
You don't
German,
know what you're doing, right? You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know, yeah. And I'll give you one example, like the whole thing, you know, people, I used to just like call people up. In Germany, you can call somebody up, a colleague, and say, hey, can you just send me this or that? You can't do this in the UK. You call somebody up and say, hey, how's it going? How's your week going? How's your friend? How's your wife? How's your this? How's your that? And you're like 5 minutes on a call before you can ask, can you do something for me? And I didn't get that at the beginning. So I was considered as being rude. I was considered as being like cold. And I'm like, well, I want to just get stuff done. I just need something quickly. I don't want to have a 10-minute conversation. And so I had to understand and learn cultural context, also with clients, obviously, more importantly. So that was a great teacher, but it was obviously difficult because it was in a market that wasn't really very patient because I didn't have enough time. So I think I came to a point where I just realized Michael Page, or that sales part of the business, is not really where I see myself long term. And because the market was where it was, I think it gave me also a little bit of that push to kind of say, okay, let's try something else. I want to do what I wanted to do initially, which means like doing recruiting, not doing sales, and just focusing really on the candidates and finding them amazing roles in an organization. And so that's why I then looked around, and there was an opportunity that came up with Deloitte, which was incredible, where I was basically then, able to move there. And I think what I probably would say generally for career moves, it's always important to think both ways. Like I always felt like it's important to think about me, obviously, and say, what do I want? But it's also important to think about them, about the company. Why would they want me?
Sure.
And so, because if you say, oh yeah, but I'm great, and I'm sure they want me, and I'm going into a completely different industry, completely different role, completely different country, that's not going to work, because they're like, what? But you're not bringing any, where's the value add? I think what was good with Deloitte was they liked about me that my international experience, they liked that I was experienced in finance recruitment. Deloitte had a lot of finance roles at the time. They liked that I was quickly available, etc. And so, and for me, it was, okay, that's my door into in-house recruitment, right? Or like, as they called it at the time, RPO. It was via like a resource recruiting process outsourcing company that was doing those services for Deloitte. And then when I planned my next career move, when I was doing this for a while, and I realized, okay, I wanna now work like different industry, and I want to work really a bit more international. And then I thought again, what can I offer LinkedIn? And it happened to be at a time that they were advertising for a German speaker. And I was a manager at Deloitte, and I was a manager at HSBC, and the role wasn't a managerial role. But I thought like, that doesn't matter, because I wanted to come into a company like LinkedIn, because I thought it's a really cool company, it's a really cool business. So I was, again, thinking about them and me. So they want German speaker. I have great experience. I don't have sector experience, but then I bring a lot of other things. And so it worked out. And I was there only for 6 months. And I think 3 months in, my manager said to me, I know you joined only as a recruiter, but would you be open again to manage people? And I said, yeah, sure. And so within another 3 months, I had a team again, and so on. So again, I think it's what I mean, like being open to opportunities, but also always thinking both sides, not just your own end, because otherwise nobody's just waiting for you. You know, usually there is always that element you need to think about. Where's the deal for them as well, or what do they want as well?
So true. I mean, we probably studied at the same school of sales, but for me, when a partnership is effective, is when there's win-win, you know, and love, as I did, matching individuals with opportunities with their aspirations. The opportunity had to be right for them, but also they had to be right for the organization. And that's not to say they've got to be like-minded. Sometimes it's a cultural addition, not cultural fit. You know, sometimes it could be an innovator and a challenger rather than the status quo. But what I really, really love is just something I've come to recently, which is just be present. Like literally be present.
Yeah.
The past is the past. You're not going to change that. You find yourself in a situation, don't worry too much about the future, because God knows what's going to happen. Like, you couldn't have predicted going to LinkedIn and then getting offered back to the level that you were at. But you were like, let me take this right now and I'll worry about the rest when I get there. And I think that so much of the strife in the human condition comes from too much past, too much future, one of the two. And I just love this for the inspiration of, go with it, but think win-win, because that will see you right. Oh, awesome. Our plane has gone phew, and I love it. You definitely took the memo and had the coffee, or is this like your natural vibe and buzz? Tell me which
my
one.
second coffee for the day, but yes.
Cheers. Me too. Cheers.
Yes.
Cheers.
Yeah, but and one thing that just like when you just said that I also probably would add is when I took the role at LinkedIn, it was initially such a 6-month fixed term contract, right? And one thing I learned from all of that is, you know, when people say dress for the job you want, not for the job you have, I think it's the same like with act like the job you want, not the job you have. Because when I came to LinkedIn, and then one of the first things was they said, oh yeah, you're doing the recruiting for Germany, but it's a bit in a mess because the person before they tried their best, but they were not German, the person before me. And they said, yeah, you know, the Germans, they're just a bit difficult. And I said, okay, well, I know they're different, but I'm not sure if they're difficult, but okay, let's see. And then they agreed to fly me over to Germany, and I was there for a week. And then when I was there, I met everybody and I made a plan, and I came back to my boss and said, look, this is, I think, what we should be doing. And that was like probably above my station as a 6 month fixed term contract recruiter that they probably hired with the expectation to come in and be transactional just to fill their 5, 6, 7, 10 roles in Germany. But I came in and said, look, this is not working. This is why it's broken. This is what we need to change. These are the kind of things I observed when I was in the office over there. And I think that made them realize, or my boss realized, well, oh shit, he can do more than that. Or there's somebody who actually can do more. And I think that's important for any role that, again, for people listening or thinking about their own career move or where they are. It's like that. It's one thing to say, yeah, I want a promotion, I want the next level up. But I think it's like most companies want to see you act already at or close to that level, or at least see the glimpse that you have that capacity before they even think or consider giving you that promotion. Nobody's going to just do that without any kind of, you know, opportunity to have seen you already showing that prospect that you can actually do that role. And I think that's really important, rather than just saying, oh, but it's not my job, and why should I do more than my job because they're only paying me this and this is my role. It's like, no, you should think strategically. If you do more, you show that you can do more, and then opportunities and promotions and other things will come your way because you put yourself in a strong position in comparison to other people, basically.
I do love it, and it's a big one for me. And this is where I might switch up my Louis Theroux investigative journalism a bit more because a balance needs to be found. And you would have seen it. We see CVs, or historically, I saw CVs of leaders who have gone from this to this to this, and it doesn't follow a line. And when I've met these people, generally the theme is they, like you, demonstrate initiative and problem-solving abilities, and they have this can-do attitude. So they ask something, they're like, okay, I'll go to Hamburg. Oh, okay, I'll go to Germany. And they'll, you know, so they'll do that. What sometimes happens in organizations is they'll say, yeah, well, let's see you step up and let's see you do that. But what's your advice in terms of how long is too long to be stepping up without the reward? Because I have also had people come to me and say, I just think they're taking the mick. Like I'm myself, I'm dual hatting, and they keep saying, yep. Like, what advice would you give on that one?
I think it's difficult to give a time like it's going to be 3 months, 6 months, whatever. But I think I would say is I agree with you. I think there is a tendency, if you have I think bad managers try to hog often people where they feel like, oh, they're doing a great job and they're making my life so much easier, and they don't want to lose these people, and they don't understand that developing people means to leave them, that they leave at some point. They leave to go into a different role in the same organization, or they might even leave to go to a different organization. But at some point people leave because you can't always offer them probably what they need at the stage where they are. And And there's a risk, I agree with you, that there's a carrot being dangled the whole time and you're chasing after that and you're going way beyond what you need to do. And I think I would probably give a few, I think it's important to set boundaries in a sense, like, for example, I didn't have family at the time. I had a partner, but I didn't have children. I was super flexible. I didn't mind. I love traveling. So when I was at LinkedIn, I loved it when they flew me over every 3 or 4 weeks to California. I was in Dublin once a month. I was in Paris. I was in Stockholm. I was in Amsterdam. I was in Munich. I was in Berlin. I loved it. I wanted that. I wasn't, seeing this as a burden. But if I would have been a young parent, maybe I would have seen this differently, right? So I think it is about I think first of all, where your own boundaries, and then it's okay to respect them. Like my boundary was always like, for example, I don't work weekends. I get my job done on Friday and I log off. And I very rarely in my career did I do any work on the weekends, but that was my choice because I always felt like I'd rather stay longer when I need to do certain things during the week and I get it done. Yeah. But I want the weekend. So other people might have different boundaries. They might say, well, I want to spend every day with my kids at like dinner and then I log in again. And I have different arrangements with different team members and so on. So I think it's about boundaries. I think it's about having a trusting relationship with your manager. And if you feel it's not working, then I think at some point also just being transparent about it and saying, look, you've been promising me this for like a long time now. I feel like I've shown, and then going in with facts and saying, I should feel like I'm showing you this, this, and this, and this. What more do you need me to do to get that promotion to the next level, to get that next role? And then I think it depends how happy are you with their answer. So I wouldn't make it necessarily a time thing. It's probably more about how genuine are they and do you trust them? And if you feel that if the trust is broken, then I think it's probably a time anyway, if you can afford it, to kind of look for something else. And I know that people listening who probably have more choice in that. And there are probably other people who say, well, I don't have that choice because because of where I live or because of my background or because of the industry I'm in. There is not many roles and I need to keep that job. So I think there's probably, yeah, but that would be my initial thoughts. If somebody would come with that kind of problem or issue, I would say this is the things I would look out for, because you don't want to be taken advantage of. That's not cool. So and
I think what you shared is really brilliant advice. So again, I'm going to add it. That's going to be our new line. So we've got Oderman, the original, and we've got a little transition variant as well to help people. Yeah. Oh, this is fantastic. And I feel like while we're together and passionate about all things inclusion, belonging, etc., at times it really feels like there's progress being made. You in your story alone, empathy, inclusion, understanding from when you came out to like present day, where Pride Month is a thing and people can be themselves, and LGBTQ plus, do you know what I mean? It's broadened and neurodiversity is more understood and accepted. So at times I'm like, yeah, like cool, man, we're getting somewhere. And other times, it depends what news you watch, I really wonder if we're a better place at all, with protests against immigrants and certain world leaders doing stuff.
Whatever.
Like, what's your view on we're making progress versus we're going backwards? Because you're living, we are the protected ones in different ways. You for your reason, me for my reasons. We're both lovers of the fuchsia and the pink. What's your view really on that? Are we going forward or do you feel like we're going backwards?
You know what? I think it is. It's probably a bit of both. I think there's definitely I feel we do a lot of work in the US and we do work in the UK and we do work in the wider European countries as well. And I think what encourages me is although there's definitely a backdrop that is more difficult now with regards to recent legislation, rollbacks of rights, change of tone from government and legal frameworks, etc. But I think with all of that, there's still lots of organizations who want to do the right thing. So I think we are still having lots of conversations with companies, especially here in the UK, who are not questioning the value of having a diverse workforce and inclusive culture where people feel they belong and where they feel they can basically be their best selves, etc., etc. I think there's probably a little bit more questioning how to go about that. We had a conversation recently with a diversity leader who said that maybe companies who over-index too much on the D, on the diversity, it became too much of a tick box, and they should have probably focused more on the belonging side, which is more inclusive for everyone, rather than picking out, certain groups and then making other groups feel that they're less worth than those groups. Like, where it becomes all a little bit of a where it becomes more like compartmentalized, and like you're looking at somebody just through the lens of like, oh, do you tick certain criteria? Okay, great. Or do you not, right? Rather than looking at the whole person and creating a culture where it just becomes less of an issue in general, and everybody feels like they can be successful regardless of what. So I do think there is progress that we're still making. I do think there's still a lot of companies who believe in it, but I also do think there's more headwinds than probably 5 years ago. So I think it's getting probably tougher for those organizations who want to do the right thing. And so I feel the role we are playing with Audeliss and me personally is just to keep encouraging those leaders that what they're doing is the right thing. It actually will pay off, and supporting them basically with regards to that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to hear. And I've got to say, I had a reaction when you were talking about some saying over-indexing on the D.
Yeah.
Personal opinion.
Yeah.
Like I said, is I think some of what has come out in terms of the rhetoric is deliberate in spreading chaos and confusion and losing the point.
Yeah.
And when you talk about over-indexing, not you, but one talks about over-indexing, I love the phrase widening the gate without lowering the bar.
Yeah.
I borrowed that from an American friend of mine, and it's really about making sure that all of us have equal opportunities to step forward and bring our best selves to any organization we choose to. And so I talk about chaos and confusion because with all this turmoil, there will be some that never really were part of it and didn't really want to do the game changing work. You can now go, okay, now we can't do anything. We don't have a plan. And then there'll be others who be like, yeah, but we were never talking about that in the first place. We were talking about, it was DEI, diversity, equity, which means equality and inclusion. So where the over-indexing on the D comes from, maybe, I can't speak for every organization, but I think in turmoil comes an opportunity for real transformation. And sometimes it's horrible, but suffering precedes progression. And it's going to be really interesting for me. But I'd love, less about me, this is about you, but you hit me with something that I was like, share what I feel. But just really reflecting on your experience working with great organizations, startups and established ones. How can organizations do better? If they're listening today to Manuel and Kofi have this coffee, how can they do better to build truly inclusive cultures? You know, where people can really feel they belong, and you or I or anyone else across the globe, whatever their uniqueness is, because 1 in 8 billion, you're going to be unique, right? How can you feel at home there? Any hints, tips, things that you've seen really, really working well that people could take away and say, let me look into this, or let me bring this to the table more and more in our organization?
I mean, generally speaking, I think it's about listening to your employees. It was interesting, like in my early career, I did an internship at a charity, a big charity, I wouldn't say which one, it doesn't matter anyway, in Germany. And it was clear that the culture was broken and it didn't really work between the full-time employees and the volunteers and so on. And I, like, university student, and just did my theory, my studies. I was very naive, like, but I said, so why don't you do an employee engagement survey and see where the issues are and what people feel about it and how you score, and then you have some data and then you can move from there. And I said, no, we can't do that. And I said, why not? I said, oh, well, if you do that, then people expect that we change something. And I said, yeah, but isn't this the point? I said, yeah, but what if we can't change what they want? And I said, yeah, but they still want it. So why do you even want to figure out what's going on? And I think it's this kind of, that's part of the basic problem. If organizations are afraid, if they know something is not right, but they're afraid to uncover it, because then if it's in the open, they have to kind of face it and deal with it. And they pretend, oh, we just keep it under the carpet, it's fine, because nobody, we just pretend it's not there. But obviously it doesn't work. It doesn't work, exactly. But I think it's the kind of thing about, if you want to create an inclusive culture, you need to listen to your people first. But because inclusive probably means different things to different people. And it's always that challenge with culture that I would say the tone is set from the top, but culture is always a bottom up, in the sense of like, you can put your values onto your fancy annual report, and you can put it into the lobby of your reception area or whatever. But if it's not being lived, I think inclusive cultures for me come from listening what your people want and then leaders acting on it. And also at LinkedIn, it was great because they had such a big focus on culture. I learned a lot about culture from my time at LinkedIn. They literally gave every employee a day a month where they would focus on culture, and that was all it. They would always talk about the need that as a leader, you need to set the expectation with regards to also cultural behaviors, values, etc. But then also create accountability and call it out if it doesn't happen. Because the worst thing is just to say, oh, this is our culture. We want to create a safe space for everyone, and we want to be inclusive. And then the first time somebody speaks up at a meeting and somebody else makes a snipey comment, the leader just lets it go. And that's obviously then, that shows then to everybody else, well, I'd rather not speak up, because if somebody else basically then makes a weird comment about what I'm thinking, nobody else is standing up for me. So I think it's that two things, like setting the tone, the expectation, but also then accountability and following up. And if the culture is not followed, or the cultures are not the values are not lived, to call it out. And actually at LinkedIn, they said we have a no arsehole policy. If you could interview the best salesperson in the world, if the team was not sure if they would bring, as you said earlier, culture ed or share the same values, they would not be hired. I have seen people where the debrief afterwards with the leadership or the hiring team was, no, we don't want this person in the team. They wouldn't fit our values, and they would not bring the right behaviors to the team, and they would not be helpful for everybody else.
I love that. And I don't want to build on it too much, because I think you just said it so succinctly. But another litmus test from that is, would you have that person round to your house? Like, would I sit down, break bread, or have a Bavarian beer with this person, or not? And if the answer is, I'm not sure, then you've got your answer there. And I think that piece around organizations who do the work, but then do not enforce what they say they're about, it then becomes disingenuous. It's not authentic, right? Like it's on the website, it's here, it's there, it's there. But then actually when a leader steps out of line, or someone who's a high performer, like sales organizations will often have this, they're great at getting business, but they're just a real prick to work with. And if you don't call it out, then you're basically saying, if you get the results, your behavior doesn't really matter. Therefore, the culture isn't really important. The culture is secondary to performance. So I'm saying less because our plane is up, and I need to bring the land gear down. There's so much to talk to you about. So much. Have you got a hard stop, like literally now, or can I?
No. I'm fine for a bit longer. No worries at all. Yeah. Don't rush.
I'm glad that you're loving it as much as me, because I don't want to.
Do. Yeah, it's great.
So we're talking about, I guess, various things, and I know the topic of sort of discrimination has come up. But for anyone that's going through a challenging time, I would love to know, like, what would Manuel do? So how have you, is the question, probably, risen above any difficult, challenging times? And it doesn't necessarily need to be through the lens of discrimination, but you mentioned a tough boss, you might different market you came into. Like, I'd love to just get into your mind as to what has enabled you to not only keep going but keep rising as well, because that can be helpful.
And it's a tough one, because I think everybody has a different, like, I think first of all, it's probably important to, I always look at this, there's this famous chart, maybe it's not famous, but I find it, where I have, for me, it's like this, with a circle, and then there's a little dot outside the circle, and there's an arrow, and it says, this is where the magic happens. And the circle is the comfort zone, and the dot is outside the comfort zone. And I think sometimes when people, I mentor a few people as well, and sometimes when people come to me and saying, oh, I feel really uncomfortable, I feel like this or that, and it's always like figuring out, why do you feel uncomfortable? Is it because you're doing something new that you don't know what you're doing yet, and therefore you feel exposed, or you feel like stressed, or you feel just like, because you're something that you haven't done so far, and that kind of makes you feel that way? Or is it, and that is, I think, that should be seen as something positive or normal, because that's how it is. When we do something new, it's always a bit uncomfortable, but we haven't done it before, etc. Or is it because how somebody behaves towards you, how your colleagues or your boss, or your customers, how they are basically showing up, and does this make you feel that way? I think it's just kind of that, for me, that's important to distinguish. And then, because if it is obviously behaviors and people, how they show up to you, then that's something that is not acceptable, where you shouldn't live through that and think, oh, I have to just like soldier through or toughen up. That's not acceptable. If it's obviously the job, and then you need to probably speak to your manager and say, look, I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm getting really stressed by this big project that you put on me, because I feel that I don't have all the tools, or I don't have all the knowledge, or I feel exposed. I think there's two different things in that sense. And I had times in my life where I probably felt like I was stressed because I felt I was doing something I haven't done before, and I didn't know what to do. And I had to figure it out. And I felt a bit like vulnerable and exposed. And then I think it's important to ask for help, and not to pretend that you have all the answers and then probably screw it up, basically, in that sense. So I think it's not weakness to ask for help if you're doing something for the first time. It's actually strength. But obviously, completely unacceptable on the other end is that what I said earlier with my earlier boss, I would have not accepted this anymore now. 20 years ago, I was young, and I was probably a little bit like, oh, this is how it probably is.
Yeah.
So I think there's the two things and if you're in doubt, and I think it's always good to sense check with people. I know lots of people have a problem with HR because they have probably bad experiences in the past. I don't know. I would always say I've had good experiences, like going to somebody in HR in the company if something like this would happen. But it's otherwise probably also just good to have a sense check with somebody you trust, a mentor or a friend, somebody close to you, which is say, hey, can I just kind of explain something that happened to me recently, or that's going on currently at work? And do you think that's normal, or do you think I'm silly, or do you think like I'm actually, there's something going on here I should be, aware about and probably change, Yeah,
I think that's so powerful in terms of shifting of perspectives, because how you've broken it down, as I took it, was there's the internal, I'm uncomfortable outside and then there's the external. And if the external is negative, then what can you do? But then also building on the external is really seeking counsel from those that want you to do well, or whose role is for you to do well, in the case of your friends and family in human resources. So yeah, that's really, really useful.
Yeah.
I
give you one more, just one more thing. It's like, also never ever don't take a role or a project or something on because you don't know yet how to do it. Because that's exactly the thing that I think you need. I think it is like a lot of times you just think, I took the opportunity, that I figured it out when I got there. I became a trainer. I never had like facilitated that kind of training before. I joined a company as an HR director. I was never an HR director before, and that was then during COVID, and suddenly I had to make 50% of the workforce redundant. Never done that before. What I'm saying is, like, don't not do something just because you haven't done it before, because then somebody else will take the opportunity, probably in the same situation as you, and they will grow with it because you were too afraid to kind of go for it. So I think just don't put too many obstacles in your own way, or your own little what RuPaul says, your inner saboteur, the person who tells you, oh no, you're not good enough, oh, you shouldn't do that, oh, you're not ready yet. It's like, no, say yes and then figure it out. That's my advice in that sense.
That's it. I love it. I've got names for it, depending on the client that I've got. It's either negative Nancy, no offense to him, or negative Nigel, or negative Nigella, whoever. But it is that inner voice and that critic, which is so powerful. And it's weird because it just wasn't there. For all of us, it comes at a different point in our lives. But if you never did anything new, we'd be all lying there needing our parents to change us and take us from place to place in a pushchair. Some days, God knows, I would love someone to push me around in a buggy. I like to go where I want to go, and that's only because I stretch myself, be it on rollerblades, bicycle, motorbike, whatever. And I find something really powerful to build on what you've said is, the more you say yes to things and realize that you survived, the more you realize that when something else comes up, actually you'll figure it out. The how in business, in life, you don't need to know. I think you just got to be aligned with yourself and be willing to see adversity or challenge as a bit of an adventure. You know, like
Yeah,
maybe be light with it, be playful with it, and go, well, hey, look, if I go and I don't like it, what's the worst
yeah,
that can happen? I'll try something else. But you will learn from that experience,
yeah,
like, well, I really like that, or actually a bit more of this or a bit less of that,
yeah,
which is all data for the journey, right? So
yeah,
that is wicked. That is so wicked. Oh
yeah.
man, I've got so much to ask you, and I realized I haven't. The biggest, juiciest question I want to ask is, well, there's two things. What is it like to work with your partner? Because some people would say you've got your home life and you've got your
Yeah.
work life, and never the two shall mix. Whereas you are both instrumental in the success and the
Yeah,
growth of the
yeah.
company. Any
And
tips?
I said, I mean, we always talk about that it was the longest recruitment process in the history of recruitment processes because it took over 10 years. And I always said, like, well, we shouldn't be working together. But actually, I think the game changer was COVID. We were both working 24/7, living and working together 24/7, obviously in
Yeah.
different companies at that time. But I think we realized actually, well, it can work. And it's actually, to be honest, now that we've been doing it for the last 4 years, the one thing that is important, I feel, when you're like in any kind of leadership position is that you have people around you. I said this earlier, people that you can trust and they can trust you. And I think that's one thing that you have with your partner. Usually you have this mutual trust and understanding, which then I think it's very important, very positive that you can bring to the organization and then
Mm,
basically um yeah, move forward. So I think for that, and then yeah, on the flip side, there have been times where, and we had this, I think, again, it comes down to what I said earlier about boundaries, right? It's like saying, look, if he wants to speak to me about like an issue he feels like I need to address in the team, and it's like 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, I said, no, it's 8 o'clock on a Sunday. Can we just
okay.
talk about this tomorrow? Or we're driving somewhere to a party like 10 o'clock in the car, and I said, no, I don't want to talk about this right now because we're on our way to a party and it's probably a longer conversation. And so it's like setting these boundaries each way. Like I think
Yeah.
it's also important. But then also sometimes, it is how it is, because it's also nice because we might go for a walk and he suddenly has like 10 ideas what we could be doing different in the company, and we're going on a walk, and then we just talk it through because we have that time and it feels right. So I think it is just, I think again, it's about setting boundaries, but also not being too strict about it, because part of the
Yeah.
beauty is that you have that kind of flow together as well, that you wouldn't
Yeah.
have otherwise in a more
No,
prescriptive work environment.
exactly that. And I think one of the things you haven't called out, but I hear in what you're saying is the communication is key. Like
Yeah,
you have in your mind, and people have boundaries, but then sometimes they don't communicate, and then they get cheesed off because they're not met.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you've been able to say, I think it speaks volumes of your relationship that it is, in my view, from the outside looking in, a
yeah,
safe space where you can say, I feel like this, or actually, I'd rather not that. And therefore, and also maybe be accepted for
yeah,
that and be, okay, cool, I get it. I'm not going to, but then at other times, you can have those brainstorming sessions on a walk. So
yeah.
that is incredible. I love it, and I really should have asked you more questions about business and plans. I think we have to do a part two. I know it might take us to 2026, but but before we go,
Let's
I
do
would
it.
really love to know, like, coming back to your work, and at the moment it's Audeliss, and hopefully for
Yeah,
a long while you guys and girls and everyone do an amazing thing. That's how I got to know of you, through
yeah,
wanting to have partners that were really on the diverse, inclusive, equitable, belonging journey, in my former role. But what would you like the legacy of the work that you do there to be?
um for me it has always been about people since I was like in a leadership role, and it was like, yeah, since nearly 20 years now, I think, or 15 years in leadership roles. And it was a saying in LinkedIn where they said, leaving people better than you found them. And for me, that's the kind of the main key, that I feel like as a leader, I, of course, I need to run a successful business. Of course, I need to like deliver against expectations that my clients have and my whatever leadership team and so forth. But I think for me, that what it comes down to is just like the legacy I would like to have is like leaving people better than I found them. And I have examples of, I'm still in touch with people that I managed my first years at Michael Page, like 15, 20 years ago. And they're all, one is now a partner in Corn Ferry. The other person has set up her own business. Other people moved into HR director roles. It's not, obviously not all because of me, but
Mm,
I feel like there were parts of it where I helped them, or I was part of their early journey or their later journey. It always makes me feel very proud when I see where people went to after they left probably the organization where I worked with them, what they did next or what they did after that. So for me, that's the important part. Yeah.
At this point, I feel we can drop the microphone, bottle this as Manuel Legacy Edition, and just spray it out into the world. Because I think you've just solved the world. Like, no, I'm not even joking. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this, because what better way to live than with every human interaction? Your goal is, let me leave you some way, somehow better than I found you. Like, Manuel, seriously, can we do this? Can we get some diffusers and spray it everywhere? That's
the next business idea. There you go.
It's a humanitarian requirement right now that I just wish that we could just plug into every office of power, every boardroom, everywhere. Just say, you've got one job. That's your one job.
One thing.
We'll do the analysis. But thank you. I know that we had a landing, but such has been the flow and the fun as well. I love that you love fun, because I'm Minister of Enjoyment these days too.
There you go.
It's incredible. So we'll have to do a part 2 and really talk about everything else that the business is doing. But you've really brought the human into the story that is available for people to piece together. And just wish you every success. And I'm going to do that. We market this diffuser idea. I'll be right back.
No, it was amazing. So thank you so much. It was great having a chat with you and a coffee. So really appreciate that. That's great.
You understood the assignment. We had 2 coffees. So we did this properly. This is why we get on. This is why we get on. Right. Well, my regards to Suki. I know Rachel's on maternity leave somewhere, somehow. So everyone else in the team, just please say hi and send my best. And we will catch up soon. I want to see you somewhere looking glamorous as ever, so that we can catch up soon.
We will.
All right?
Awesome. Good stuff. Thank you so much.
Right,
looking forward to the finished product. All righty.
Indeed.
Thank
all
you.
Right.
Have a good week.
Yeah.
Bye.